Outside the ancient body refining tower, the violent and unmatched spiritual energy surged like a storm, sweeping across each of the reception platforms. The land itself seemed to tremble under the force of the fierce battle for the limited spots on the stone seats of the platforms, with strong warriors from all sides exerting their utmost strength to claim them. Among these 10 reception platforms, Chen's platform was the first to calm down. Unlike the chaotic scenes elsewhere, ever since he had defeated Xun'er, no one had attempted to challenge him on this platform. Of course, this did not mean that the powerful individuals present were afraid of Chen. Rather, it was because this reception platform was almost entirely covered with brilliant spirit patterns. These patterns seemed to merge with the heavens and the earth, like stars, gently flickering with light. Some strong warriors cast their gazes toward the platform, and upon seeing the dense array of spirit patterns, they could not help but feel a chill down their spines. No one knew how many spirit arrays Chen had set up on this platform. At this moment, the platform could be considered a fortress of spirit arrays, and Chen, standing within it, was almost in an invincible position. This was the terrifying power of a spiritual array master. Given enough time, they could create a formidable fortress, and any who attempted to breach it would face a devastating counterattack. Under the watchful eyes of those present, Chen flicked his fingers, sending out some spirit light that blended into the void. He then gently clapped his hands, and using the time he had set up a heavenly mountain divine seal array on the platform, with several earth-grade spirit arrays hidden within it. When combined, the power of this setup was astounding. That if Xun'er had dared to rush in again, Chen was confident that he would have no chance of escaping. Having completed his preparations, Chen ceased his actions. At this moment, he no longer feared anyone. He was absolutely confident that among the 7th grade Supremes, there was no one capable of taking his reception platform away from him. With his mind at ease, Chen turned his attention to the other 9 reception platforms, where fierce battles were still ongoing. In the midst of the wild outburst of spiritual energy, images of various divine beasts continued to emerge, and their roars shook the heavens. His gaze first landed on the platform where Mo Feng was. His eyes fixed on it. His expression stiffened. Mo Feng's opponent was a beautiful and graceful woman, whose back was adorned with a pair of fiery red wings. Countless fiery feathers whizzed around her, releasing a sharp, unmatched sword aura that tore the space apart, leaving it riddled with cracks. She was a prodigy of the Flame Crane clan, and her strength had reached the 7th grade Supreme. The sword aura she wielded was even stronger than Xun'er's, clearly a formidable opponent. However, in the face of her relentless assault, Mo Feng remained calm. His expression was indifferent as he stepped back with each strike, seeming as if he was being suppressed and unable to retaliate. But Chen, observing this scene, narrowed his eyes and focused intently on Mo Feng, as he faintly sensed that the spiritual energy surrounding him was gradually heating up, as if something was about to be unleashed. That is, Chen's gaze tightened, his pupils constricting. Screech. Mo Feng's steps retreated to the edge of the platform, and he finally stopped. With a neutral expression, he locked eyes with the prodigy from the Flame Crane clan. That he suddenly formed a hand seal, and instantly, a phoenix cry echoed through the heavens. Boom! Crimson-red phoenix wings spread out from Mo Feng's back, reaching nearly 100 feet in size. Then, with a powerful flap of his wings, a dark red flame gathered and surged forward, enveloping the area like an ocean of fire. The dark red flames roared as they passed, and within them, the shadow of a phoenix seemed to materialize, and immense pressure emanated, causing the surrounding air to become suffocating. The woman from the Flame Crane clan was taken aback upon seeing this. Her face paled as she exclaimed, "Aren't you from the 9 Nether Sparrow clan? How do you possess Phoenix Flame?" Phoenix Flame was a power that only the elite of the Phoenix clan could cultivate. It was incredibly destructive, capable of burning the heavens and boiling the seas. What was more crucial was that this Phoenix Flame had a suppressive effect on many bird-like divine beasts, including the woman from the Flame Crane clan. The dark red flames swept across, colliding with the sharp sword feathers that were rushing towards them. In an instant, those sword feathers melted away, and the phoenix flame surged forward like a worm burrowing into bone, directly sweeping towards the woman from the Flame Crane clan. Her face changed dramatically, and without hesitation, she retreated. In just a few flashes, she had exited the reception platform. She cast a furious glance at Mo Feng before swiftly retreating. This woman was decisive. She knew that with Mo Feng's phoenix flame, he had the upper hand in their confrontation. There was no chance of victory for her in this battle. The longer she delayed, the more time she would waste. Mo Feng watched the retreating expert from the Flame Crane clan, his expression still calm. With a wave of his sleeve, the dark red phoenix flame surged back and was finally swallowed by him. Many other experts who had originally set their sights on Mo Feng now stared at him with a mix of suspicion and wariness. They had clearly seen that Mo Feng was with the 9 Nether Sparrow clan. So how could he have mastered the Phoenix Flame? What was his connection to the Phoenix clan? Phoenix Flame? Huh? Mu Chen, watching this scene, wasn't surprised. After all, he had seen it before on Mo Ling, but now it seemed that Mo Feng and his sister truly had a deep connection to the Phoenix clan. However, Mu Chen didn't dwell on it. Everyone had their secrets, and he wasn't inclined to probe into others' matters. He shook his head to dismiss the thought and smiled faintly towards the reception platform where Mo Feng was. Given the situation, Mo Feng should be able to secure that platform, meaning they would both successfully claim their spots. Mo Feng noticed Mu Chen's gaze and nodded in acknowledgement. When his eyes swept across Mu Chen's platform, covered in spirit arrays, his heart skipped a beat. Clearly, he had realized the potential danger of those spirit arrays. It seemed that Mu Chen's mastery of spirit arrays was stronger than he had anticipated. Boom! As the results of Mu Chen and Mo Feng's platforms became clear, other platforms began to show signs of resolution. The first to dominate the scene was Han Shan from the Rhinoceros Demon clan. His opponent was Su Kuan from the Demon Elephant clan, another powerful figure. Both of them possessed immense strength, making their clash a violent collision like that of ancient ferocious rhinos and giant elephants. Every impact made the earth tremble. After hundreds of exchanges, it was clear that Han Shan had the upper hand. In the end, during one fierce collision, he directly sent Su Kuan flying off the reception platform. Su Kuan, with a pale face, landed without a word. He immediately turned and rushed towards another platform, where his opponent seemed far easier to deal with. Following Han Shan, the next to secure a platform was Zhong Tung from the Heavenly Rock clan. This man was indeed extraordinary, one of the top-tier figures present. When he fought with full force, few could contend with him. Eventually, he successfully claimed a reception platform, while several other Heavenly Rock clan experts hovered above the platform, intimidating the other races. After this, the remaining platforms gradually began to resolve, one by one, after intense and fierce competition. Lu Jia from the Devouring Crocodile clan, Chen Zhan from the Dragon Ape clan, and the previously slightly defeated Su Kuan from the Heavenly Elephant clan. Mu Chen's gaze swept across them before suddenly stopping at the last platform. He frowned slightly when he saw who had claimed it. To his surprise, it was someone he knew, the black-robed man from the Thunder Crow clan, whom he had met in the Meteor Belt. He hadn't expected these guys to be here as well, and to secure a platform. When the black-robed man from the Thunder Crow clan noticed Mu Chen's gaze, he looked up. His expression tightened when he saw Mu Chen. Then his gaze fell on the spirit arrays covering Mu Chen's platform, and his pupils contracted slightly. Mu Chen didn't pay him any attention, withdrawing his gaze. Now, after fierce competition, the 10 reception platforms had finally settled down. It was clear that these 10 individuals were the strongest here, but the question remained: who among them would achieve the best results and gain the greatest opportunities in the ancient body refining pagoda? Mu Chen's thoughts whirled, and his gaze shifted toward the ancient, weathered stone tower. His eyes gradually grew intense as he realized that the opportunity for his breakthrough to the second layer of the dragon and phoenix scripture lay within that very tower. As Mu Chen's mind turned, the spiritual energy tempest around him gradually subsided. On the 10 reception platforms, 10 figures stood tall, each exuding a fierce and astonishing aura, clearly extraordinary beings. Boom! With the subsiding of the spiritual energy tempest, a deep, ancient humming sound suddenly resonated from within the body refining tower. Then, everyone watched in awe as the surface of the ancient tower shimmered, its lights swirling, before transforming into 10 beams of light that shot out. Enveloping the 10 figures on the platforms, as the beams approached, Chen instantly felt a pull. Attempting to drag his body away, with a flash of his eyes, he ceased resisting. Whoosh! The beams screamed back, carrying the figures with them. The onlookers, their gazes burning with anticipation, saw those figures being pulled into the body refining tower. 9 Nether watched as Chen was drawn into the tower, her jade hand tightening into a fist. From here on out, she could offer him no more assistance. The outcome of his trials would depend entirely on his own abilities. Boom! When the spiritual energy around Chen had completely dissipated, a crimson glow suddenly descended, and with it, an overwhelming heat that swept from all directions. Chen's skin was almost immediately scorched by the terrifying red light. A searing pain spread through his body, making him gasp sharply. Damn it! Chen cursed through gritted teeth, then his mind focused. Golden light began to radiate from his body, and the true dragon mark on his chest seemed to come alive. Moving across his body, the mark shifted. The burns on his body rapidly began to heal. A faint, cooling sensation spread, easing the excruciating pain. Noticing the pain within his body lessen, Chen let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, his physical body was strong enough. Otherwise, he would have found it almost impossible to withstand the torment of this terrifying red light. Next, I want to see just how terrifying the first layer of the body refining tower really is. Chen lifted his head, his gaze fixed on the distant desert. A determined look flickered in his black eyes. Without hesitation, he stepped off the stone platform and into the desert. After weighing his options, he chose not to fly over the desert, but instead took the slowest path. Walking, since he had decided to use the red light to refine his body, he naturally had to choose the most difficult path. Whoosh! As Chen's foot stepped into the desert, white smoke rose from the ground beneath him. His steps sank, as though he had entered magma. But Chen paid it no mind. He took step after step, facing the vast red light descending upon him, heading deeper into the desert. Outside the body refining tower. At this moment, the powerful beings from various clans turned their attention to the weathered stone tower. Their gazes locked onto the first layer of the tower, where light condensed, forming a glowing barrier. Though no figures could be clearly seen within the light, 10 dots of light flickered. These light dots represented the 10 people inside the tower, each one linked to an individual. The people outside the tower could sense the general situation inside based on the fluctuations of their spiritual energy. At this time, 9 of the light dots were moving at an astonishing speed. Looks like Xun'er from the Heavenly Rock clan is in the lead for now. Many eyes focused on the first light dot, and soon, they could identify the person based on the spiritual energy signature. It was Xun'er of the Heavenly Rock clan. Xun'er has awakened the bloodline of the Golden-Winged Rock. His speed is extraordinary, so it's no surprise he's ahead. Han Shan, Su Kuan, and the others aren't far behind either. The other prodigies were no pushovers either. It was possible that they might seize the chance to enter the second layer ahead of others. Outside the body refining tower, the experts kept a constant watch on the events inside. Whispers spread among them. There's one person who doesn't seem to have moved at all. As the crowd murmured, a mocking laugh rang out from a woman. From the fluctuation of spiritual energy, it seems like it's that human kid from the 9 Nether Sparrow clan. Looks like in this body refining tower, the spirit arrays don't seem to have much effect. Many of the experts were stunned, and it was only then that they noticed, as the 9 light spots sped toward the second layer, there was indeed one light spot far behind that remained completely still. The experts exchanged glances, then shifted their curious gazes toward the 9 Nether and Mo Ling. That human kid had been quite impressive earlier, but now that he was in the body refining tower, he seemed utterly incapable. What a wasted opportunity. 9 Nether's face darkened with coldness. She glared at the person who had mocked them. It was Lu Qing of the Heavenly Rock clan. This woman had been quiet for a while after Chen defeated Xun'er, but now she was starting to cause trouble again, which was truly annoying. 9 Nether. Look at you. Seems like the spot you fought so hard for is going to be wasted by this person. What a pity, Lu Qing sneered, her face full of satisfaction and smugness, as though she had vented her frustration. Enjoy your pride now, but be careful not to lose face later, Nine Nether said coldly, her eyes narrowing slightly. Lu Qing mocked, oh, I'm looking forward to it. Nine Nether shot her a cold glance, but didn't bother responding further. She turned her gaze back to the light spot at the first layer of the body refining tower, her brows furrowed slightly. Sister Nine Nether, what's Mu Chen doing? Mo Ling asked softly. Puzzled. Nine Nether shook her head with a bitter smile, her eyes also filled with confusion. While the ancient body refining tower was certainly difficult to navigate, Mu Chen's strength should have been enough to avoid getting stuck on the first layer. The current situation likely had other reasons behind it. Could it be that he had been ambushed by other experts from various clans when he first entered the tower? The thought crossed her mind, but quickly faded. Among the 9, only Zhong Tung and the Thunder Crow clan members might have animosity toward the 9 Nether Sparrow clan. It shouldn't have been enough for those two to force Mu Chen into such a predicament. Moreover, Mo Feng was also nearby. Mu Chen, what are you doing? Nine Nether stared at the stone tower, her jade hand tightening into a fist as she murmured. In the boundless desert, a crimson light poured down, covering the land in a suffocating glow. There was no escaping it. SSS. SSS. In the silent desert, a faint sound of footsteps emerged. Turning to look, a figure appeared, walking slowly through the yellow sands. SSS. Blood trickled down Mu Chen's face. Before it could even fall, it evaporated into the air. His entire body was crimson, and his flesh was visibly exposed under the intense heat. The searing pain constantly assaulted Mu Chen's mind, threatening to overwhelm him. However, despite the continuous waves of agony, his steps remained slow but firm. Even though his flesh burned, he did not stop, because he could feel it. Though the terrifying red light seared his flesh, when the pain reached its peak, his body seemed to grow stronger. It felt as though the flesh itself was devouring the crimson light that penetrated his skin and bones. Each time his flesh absorbed a bit of the red light, a powerful force surged from within, gathering in the depths of what seemed like ruined flesh, bringing with it an alarming vitality. This red light, while causing excruciating pain to the body, would reward the flesh with great strength once the pain was endured and absorbed. So this is how it is. Mu Chen's hand, which looked as though it had been skinned, trembled as he clenched it. He could clearly feel the burgeoning vitality in his blood and flesh after enduring the intense pain. He had only been walking in this desert for half an hour. Though the excruciating pain nearly drove him mad, the enhancement of his physical body was not to be underestimated. In just this brief half hour, his physical strength had probably surpassed even that of the blood spirit mud embryo he had previously refined. The center of Mu Chen's chest, the swirling true dragon mark and his dragon scales seemed to become more vivid, while the true phoenix mark on his back caused his wings to slightly unfurl. Most importantly, the true dragon and phoenix patterns on his body, just the faintest hint of his eyes opening, seemed to show signs of awakening once again. All these changes caused the corner of Mu Chen's mouth to stiffen into a faint, subtle smile. But that minor movement sent a tremor through his body, and the pain grew even more intense. However, Mu Chen paid no mind. He lifted his head to look into the distance, in the depths of his black eyes. There was a flicker of fiery excitement. He could feel his physical body gradually adapting to the terrifying crimson light. Moreover, if this continued, he might really be able to break through to the second layer of the dragon and phoenix scripture in this body refining tower. At that point, his physical body would be strengthened to a degree that even he would desire. However, he could sense that as his body adapted to the crimson light of the first layer, the enhancement of his physical body was beginning to slow down. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before this first layer would feel like walking on flat ground, with no resistance at all. Mu Chen licked his dry lips, then without hesitation, took another step forward, moving slowly as his flesh and blood subtly shifted under the crimson light. While Mu Chen was advancing slowly on the first layer, he was unaware that his actions outside the tower had drawn quite a few voices. However, Most of them were filled with sarcastic mockery, as if waiting for a spectacle. Heh, Nine Nether, I've been watching for quite a while, but there's nothing surprising yet. Oh wait, he hasn't been standing still. In this half hour, he's been moving at a snail's pace. Lu Qing laughed sweetly, her sharp voice filled with malice. Your Nine Nether Sparrow clan may have some ability, but wasting such an opportunity like this is a bit too much. You should know that there are plenty of other clans here who haven't even earned a spot in the first place. Lu Qing's maliciousness was clear, seemingly trying to provoke hatred toward the Nine Nether Sparrow clan. Her words had the desired effect, as several gazes turned toward Nine Nether and Mo Ling, accompanied by growing resentment and jealousy. Nine Nether's delicate face remained cold, but she said nothing. Her gaze remained fixed on the light screen of the tower, watching the faint dot of light on the first layer still moving slowly forward. It felt as if it was now too weak to catch up, but as she watched, Nine Nether's beautiful eyes suddenly narrowed. She noticed that the faint dot of light had once again paused. Mu Chen, can't go any further? In the Crimson Desert, Mu Chen's steps finally halted. He raised his head to look directly at the blazing red sun, and then the corner of his mouth lifted into a faint smile. This first layer is enough, Mu Chen muttered to himself. Earlier, he had clearly felt that his flesh and blood had fully adapted to the crimson light here. The excruciating pain had significantly diminished, but the sensation of physical enhancement had also slowed considerably. The first layer had already reached its limit in terms of refining his physical body. Thank you, Mu Chen stretched lazily and smiled at the scorching sun. Then, golden light surged around his body, rapidly healing his scorched skin. His gaze, now burning with determination, shifted to the distant horizon. Those people should be entering the second layers soon, right? If so, it was time for him to try catching up to them before they reached the next level. At the heart of the crimson glowing desert, the seemingly endless sand finally came to an end at the farthest point. A massive barrier of red light descended, forming a natural shield that divided this world in two. This overwhelming crimson light clearly had an extremely terrifying temperature as it spread. It even caused the surrounding space to warp, as though it were on the verge of being completely incinerated. Compared to this red light barrier, the crimson light that had filled the desert seemed insignificant at this moment. In midair before the crimson light barrier, several figures were suspended in the air, looking at the crimson screen before them, their expressions grim. Is this the barrier to the second layer? Elsewhere in this region, Mo Feng, Han Shan from the Rhinoceros Demon Clan, and Su Kuan from the Heavenly Elephant Clan had also arrived. They stared at the crimson light barrier ahead, their expressions equally serious. Naturally, they could sense how difficult it would be to breach the crimson light barrier. The intense heat within it was not to be underestimated. Even by them, a careless mistake could result in severe consequences, if not death. Behind them, several figures quickly approached, but when faced with the obstruction of the crimson light barrier, no one dared to rush in recklessly. Although the crimson light barrier appeared to cover only 1,000 zhang area, under normal circumstances, such a distance could be crossed in the blink of an eye. But here, in this place, this 1,000 zhang distance seemed like a road to death, enough to make one's heart race. The silence in the area lasted for a while, and no one intended to continue waiting. Zhong Tung gritted his teeth and, without saying another word, suddenly a golden light burst from his body and a pair of golden wings unfolded from his back, and golden feathers began to appear on his body, like scales, enveloping him for protection, activating this defense. Zhong Tung still wasn't reassured. He immediately tossed a golden umbrella into the air, and it transformed into a golden light shield that enveloped him. With these layers of defense around him, Zhong Tung felt a little more secure. Without further hesitation, he stepped directly into the vast crimson light. Sizzle! As soon as he stepped into the crimson light, Zhong Tung's face instantly contorted in pain, with wisps of white smoke emanating from his body. The golden scales and feathers on his body began to melt away. The excruciating pain made Zhong Tung's scalp tingle. However, Zhong Tung, being a prodigy of the Heavenly Rock clan, would not retreat so easily. He immediately activated his full defensive power and charged towards the end of the crimson light. Seeing this, Han Shan, Su Kuan, and the others also did not dare to let Xun'er face the challenge alone. They quickly unleashed various techniques, heavily arming themselves, and charged forward. However, it was clear that some had underestimated the power of the crimson light. Not long after stepping in, they were scorched by the intense heat, screaming in agony as white smoke rose. It seemed as though they were about to catch fire. Although they were not directly burned, their spiritual power was severely depleted, indicating serious damage. The commotion caused Han Shan and the others to grow cautious. Their previous speed slowed as they carefully attempted to navigate through the crimson light barrier. As Xun'er and the others slowly moved through the crimson barrier, they suddenly glanced toward the distant back, their brows furrowing. Just a moment ago, they seemed to have sensed some unusual spiritual fluctuations. Had someone else arrived? It seems that Xun'er, Han Shan, and the others have reached the end of the first layer. As long as they endure there, they will be able to enter the second layer. At this time, outside the body refining tower, many powerful figures were discussing the slowing down of the lights, but there was no concern. Xun'er, Han Shan, and the others were prodigies from various clans, while Dash prepared. As long as they were cautious, entering the second layer should be almost certain. As everyone focused on Xun'er and the others, a surprised voice suddenly rang out. Chen's speed has increased. Everyone was startled, and their gazes shifted. Indeed, the light that had been moving at a very slow pace from the back had now accelerated. He finally moved, but by the time he catches up, others will have already entered the second layer. With such a result, don't expect any opportunities, said Lu Qing from the Heavenly Rock clan, with a sneer. However, as soon as her voice fell, a burst of exclamations erupted around them. Many powerful figures' expressions changed, for they saw that the speed of that light point had become incredibly fast, racing towards the end of the first layer at an astonishing speed. It was as if the trials within the first layer were no longer an obstacle to it. Such speed, faster than Xun'er's earlier pace. At this rate, he might soon catch up to Xun'er, Han Shan, and the others. How is that possible? With his speed, is he not afraid of the trials of the first layer of the body refining tower? Exclamations of disbelief echoed as many strong figures were stunned, their faces filled with incredulity. They couldn't imagine that this person, whom they had nearly written off, was suddenly displaying such remarkable courage. Amidst the exclamations, Lu Qing's delicate face turned pale. She stared at the swiftly advancing light with clenched teeth and said, "What good is running fast? He still won't pass the first layer's barrier." On the other side, Ju Yu and Mo Ling sighed in relief. Looking at it now, Mu Chen still had a chance to compete with the other strong figures. But they were puzzled about what he had been doing during the time he was moving so slowly. It was really hard to figure out. Outside the body refining tower, under the many gazes, the light that was initially the furthest behind quickly caught up to the 9 leading light dots. In the massive crimson light barrier, Xun'er and the others moved cautiously, their bodies enveloped by layers of defenses, shielding them from the terrifying dissolving power of the red light. At that moment, their expressions suddenly changed. They quickly turned their heads, and then, in shock, saw a shadow of light speeding from the distant horizon. In just a few moments, it appeared outside the red light barrier. The speed of the shadow startled them. Who could be so bold to fly at such speed under the terrifying red light? Were they not afraid of being burned to ashes? Their gazes focused, and their pupils shrank suddenly. The shadow gradually became clearer. A young figure quietly appeared in their sight. It's that human kid. Is it Mu Chen? Xun'er's pupils contracted, his gaze darkened, and he couldn't believe it. They had left Mu Chen far behind. So how could he catch up in such a short time? Even he couldn't match this speed. On the side, Mo Feng sighed in relief. This Mu Chen sure surprised them time and again. Even if he catches up, so what? The red light here is several times more domineering than outside. This kid's human body will probably be completely dissolved by the red light when he steps in. Some people coldly sneered, clearly not believing Mu Chen would dare enter the red light barrier. After all, even they had to rely on multiple layers of protection to cautiously advance. However, just as they sneered, Mu Chen outside the red light barrier smiled slightly. Then, in the widened eyes of many onlookers, he calmly stepped into the red light. Seeking death. He hasn't even activated his spiritual energy, trying to rely on his physical body to enter the red light. Seeing his actions, several figures immediately widened their eyes, waiting for Mu Chen to walk down the path to his own destruction. Sizzle. As Mu Chen stepped into the red light, the terrifying heat immediately began to erode him, suffocating him as white smoke rose from his skin. His body was immediately scorched, and the sound of his flesh sizzling under the red light made a chilling noise, as if it was about to ignite. The excruciating pain once again ravaged him. Mu Chen's face twisted for a moment. Then he gritted his teeth and smiled. The red light here was indeed more domineering than outside. However, his physical body, having endured the scorching red light earlier and aided by the Dragon Phoenix body's powerful adaptability, had greatly enhanced his resistance to the red light. Thus, he lifted his head and, facing the pitying and mocking gazes, he smiled lightly. At that moment, the true dragon mark on his chest began to move, and as it did, his flesh seemed to revive. His blood and flesh began to absorb the penetrating red light energy. His body seemed to be growing stronger once again. The white smoke seeping from Mu Chen's body gradually dissipated, and his figure once again appeared before the gazes of the many onlookers. Zhong Teng, Han Shan, and the others' pupils suddenly contracted at this moment. Mu Chen's body was radiating golden light, his skin flawless as ever. The crimson light that shone down did not bring about any destructive damage as expected. Instead, it seemed to highlight his skin, reflecting a strange dark golden glow. The domineering crimson light that melted everything around it seemed to have no effect on Mu Chen. How is this possible? A voice full of disbelief echoed in the hearts of everyone present. However, Mu Chen paid no attention to their astonishment. He slowly clenched his palm, then glanced at the people crawling forward like turtles. A faint smile curled at the corner of his mouth. Looks like this time, I'll be taking the lead. With those words, his foot stomped the ground, and in an instant, he turned into a streak of golden light, whooshing forward. In the blink of an eye, he had left Zhong Teng and the others far behind. The group watched as the light figure swiftly disappeared into the distance, their faces blank, unable to regain their senses for a long time. Outside the body refining tower, the noise that had once filled the air suddenly quieted. Everyone's face showed shock as they stared at the light screen before the tower. More specifically, they were staring at a single light dot within the screen. That dot of light had originally been at the very back, but within a short span of time, it had reversed direction, catching up and surpassing all the others. Now, it had even overtaken the other 9 people. How is this possible? Did the first layer's barrier not stop Mu Chen at all? Someone murmured, astonished. They had watched as Mu Chen, within just a few minutes, had surpassed everyone else. Now, he was heading toward the second layer of the body refining tower at a speed far exceeding that of the others. Many of the powerful figures were left speechless, gazing at the bizarre scene in disbelief and shock, exchanging confused glances. At the back, the eyes of the 9 nether beauty, Jiuyu, sparkled with light. Her tightly clenched jade hand relaxed as she sighed in relief. If Mu Chen had performed poorly in the body refining tower, some elders within the clan who were already critical of her would have used the opportunity to accuse her of wasting a valuable slot in the tower. Though she could ignore them, those old men could be incredibly annoying when they raised their voices. Mu Chen, big brother, really is amazing. Mo Ling, who was beside her, couldn't help but praise. Although Mu Chen's strength as a 6th grade supreme was considered the weakest among the 9 prodigies, his performance now was nothing short of breathtaking. Jiuyu smiled faintly. Then, her beautiful eyes glanced to another direction, where several strong members of the Heavenly Rock clan were watching with darkened expressions, especially Lu Qing. Her pretty face alternated between pale and greenish hues, as if slightly twisted, clearly shaken by the unexpected events in the body refining tower. Noticing Jiuyu's gaze, Lu Qing's face turned even darker. She clenched her teeth and muttered, "What's there to be proud of? This is just the first layer that I don't believe that he can continue to be so lucky." The change in the tower had clearly left her skeptical. She didn't T believed that Chen had surpassed the other 9 prodigies through sheer strength. Instead, she thought that he must have used some trick to get lucky and pass. Jiu, hearing this, didn't respond. She wasn't in the mood to argue with Lu Qing. Instead, she casually withdrew her gaze, smiling as she continued to observe the light screen. However, Lu Qing was enraged by her indifferent attitude, feeling as if she were being belittled. Wasn't Jiu acting as if she were above her? I'll see how long you can remain smug. Lu Qing gritted her teeth and turned her gaze back to the light screen, focusing intensely on the light dot at the front. Her hateful stare seemed to curse Chen in her heart. Yet, her curses were of no use. The light, under her red-rimmed gaze, still moved at a steady pace, far outstripping the others, gradually advancing. At this rate, it seemed that Chen was about to break through the first layer's barrier and enter the second layer of the body refining tower. Outside the body refining tower, everyone held their breath, their eyes wide as they focused on the light screen. Just as they watched intently, the flickering light suddenly vanished without a trace. The sudden disappearance of the light immediately caused a stir in the area. However, it wasn't long before someone regained their senses, and their shifting gaze abruptly moved upward. Then, the strong individuals of various races couldn't help but gasp in shock. This was because, on the second level of the body refining tower, a light screen appeared once again. Now, on that light screen, a single light dot stood alone. Looking at the spiritual energy fluctuations, it was unmistakably Chen. He had actually been the first to pass the test of the first level and was the first to enter the second level. Moreover, he had achieved this reversal despite being so far behind. Such performance left the strong figures dumbfounded that it was clear that this was the first time they had ever heard of such a situation. Amidst the shock and commotion, Lu Qing's delicate face turned pale, her silver teeth grinding. Together with a sharp, audible sound. Is this the second level of the body refining tower? While the outside world was in turmoil, Chen, who had just passed through the crimson light barrier, curiously set his gaze on the space that had once again changed its appearance. At this moment, he still found himself standing on a stone platform, which emitted a glowing light that enveloped him, similar to the first level. However, outside the stone platform, there was a desolate frozen land. The ground was ice blue, and the entire space seemed to be suffused with a faint blue glow, which seemed to possess an extremely cold power. As the glow illuminated the area, the space appeared to freeze. Moreover, a bone-chilling wind was blowing through the land. The wind was incredibly domineering, capable of shredding even exposed metal into countless tiny particles in an instant. Chen's expression became serious as he stared at the desolate frozen land. Even though he had not yet stepped into it, he could already sense how domineering the blue-cold aura and the piercing wind were in this space. The combination of the two was probably more ferocious than the dissolving crimson light of the first level. But this was precisely the kind of challenge that would forge a truly powerful, almost indestructible, eternal physical body. A look of longing and anticipation appeared in Chen's eyes, and he then sat cross-legged on the stone platform. He didn't rush into the second level. After passing the crimson light barrier earlier, his flesh had subtly ached, with the red light circulating through his blood and flesh. He needed to devour all of it to strengthen his body. Chen closed his eyes, and the faint red light beneath his skin slowly merged into his blood and flesh, causing the vitality in his body to become increasingly vigorous. This quiet meditation lasted for nearly 10 minutes. Then, Chen's heart stirred, and his eyes opened. He looked into the distance and saw the space there ripple. Soon, stone platforms began to materialize out of thin air, followed by several figures appearing one after another. Although these figures appeared at different times, they were all, without exception, quite disheveled. Each of them was emitting blue smoke, their skin torn and bloodied, clearly having suffered greatly from the crimson light barrier. Thus, as soon as they appeared, they immediately sat down to recover. Only when their bodily injuries and the spiritual energy consumed within them were restored could they finally let out a sigh of relief. Once recovered, their gazes were not immediately cast toward the frozen land, but instead, they looked directly at Chen in the distance. In their eyes, there were various expressions, some curious, some solemn, and some with subtle killing intent. It was evident that Mu Chen's reversal had left them unable to understand. They had no idea how Mu Chen had been able to move so freely within the crimson light barrier. It seemed as though the crimson light of the first level had posed no significant obstacle for him. However, those who were able to reach this place were all elites from the younger generations of various races. Therefore, they all had a certain level of composure and quickly concealed their doubts. They then began to observe the second level's space with indifferent expressions. Throughout all this, Mu Chen remained with his eyes half closed, completely ignoring the others. He had already made up his mind. He would be more than satisfied if he could use the body refining tower to break through the dragon and phoenix scripture to the second level. As for the so-called divine art opportunities or treasures of semi-saint grade, he could temporarily set those aside. Entering the divine beast planes, one could see the many prodigies from various races in the spirit beast realm. However, the ones present here were only a small fraction of them. Even so, each one was formidable in their own right, and none were to be underestimated at this moment. Relying on his heavenly grade spirit array, he wasn't particularly worried, but he also understood that, with just these two heavenly grade spirit arrays in hand, it was unlikely they would help him easily assist the Nine Nether in obtaining the Phoenix God Blood. Therefore, he needed to break through to the second realm of the Dragon and Phoenix scripture. When that time came, relying solely on his physical body, he would be able to rival even the 7th grade Supreme. The strength of his body would be far superior, and likely unmatched by any divine beast of the same level as Mu Chen's. Thoughts raced. The 9 stone platforms were once again in motion. Zhong Tung, Han Shan, and the others began to move. They clenched their palms, and objects that flickered with all sorts of spiritual light appeared in their hands, transforming into various items. Clearly, these were rare treasures with unique powers. Zhong Tung cast a cold glance toward Mu Chen, who was still at a distance, then flicked his fingers. Immediately, the copper furnace in his hand ignited, engulfing him in a roaring green flame. This was wind-defying flame, a very peculiar fire that protected its user from all winds. It was perfectly suited to deal with the howling gales in this place. I'm curious to see if you can catch up this time. Zhong Tung sneered, and without further hesitation, he charged forward under the protection of the furnace, his figure transforming into a streak of green light as he swiftly sped away. Following Zhong Tung, the others also began to move one by one, fully unleashing their speed. Feng, walking at the back, cast a strange glance at Mu Chen, who remained motionless. He didn't say anything more, but flames surged around his body, forming a protective barrier before he quickly followed after the others. Once they had all left, Mu Chen finally opened his eyes. He looked at the receding figures of Zhong Tung and the others with a faint, amused smile. Although these people had many spiritual treasures, they were blinded by their so-called divine arts and opportunities that Mu Chen. However, the greatest treasure in this body refining tower wasn't those fleeting chances to it was the immense refinement the body underwent here. Of course, Mu Chen was well aware of how terrifying the crimson radiance and blue cold aura could be to the body, and not everyone possessed a cultivation method as powerful and miraculous as the Dragon and Phoenix scripture. That was why it would be difficult for them to adapt to such brutal trials in such a short time as he had. You pursue your opportunities. I shall walk my own path of fortune, Mu Chen murmured to himself, then smiled slightly. With a graceful wave of his sleeve, he effortlessly stepped out of the light barrier, entering the desolate frozen land. The second layer of this body refining tower should be enough to further temper his body. The second layer of the Dragon and Phoenix scripture was not far off.